Hello there. Welcome to the Nuclear Art Podcast. I'm your nuclear hearted host. Yes, it's a real medical condition. Thank you, White Sands, New Mexico. Joined by frequent collaborator Dan,
Hello.
and in honor of The Flash hitting movie theaters, I thought we would visit an outline I found of the original Flash movie that was supposed to come out. It was originally being written in 2016, and it's currently not that year right now. So clearly, it's been a while. So let's get into it. And this comes courtesy of a leak online. So normally I'd be like, this is probably not reputable, but everything else about DC that is leaked has turned out to be true. So
Yeah, and also this whether or not it sounds legit does not necessarily mean whether or not it's real because the past things that they've actually been saying,
yeah,
like Creature Commando movie or
yeah.
whatever, that doesn't sound real, but it
And
is.
it's also worth noting that I'm not doing this episode to personally attack the director of the new Flash movie. I really like his movies, like the It movies that he did.
Mm.
And I think he did as good a job as he could with the budget that was clearly slashed. Anyway, so here's a brief description. So again, script was originally written in 2016 and was canon to Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is obvious because that was going to be the only Justice League.
Yeah.
So, plot follows Barry Allen's evolution both as a hero and an investigator. At the start, he fights crimes in secret and is only concerned with reinvestigating his mother's case. In the end, he becomes a public hero and proves himself as a forensic scientist. So, nothing too wild yet. The villains are Captain Cold and Golden Glider, who are hired to steal the components of an electromagnetic weapon from Star Labs. Captain Cold has an exoskeleton with cryogenic weapons, and Golden Glider has a device that allows her to glide through solid matter. So I'm thinking sort of
Oh.
uh, Silver Surfer from the 2005 movie,
Hmm.
where because that was a great shot when he goes through the building and just sort of like,
Water effects.
yeah, that was pretty sick. Um, There was a major subplot about Barry trying to prove that a reformed criminal was framed for a murder he didn't commit, and exposing corrupt cops who had been fabricating evidence for years, including for Barry's father's case.
So it's not Reverse Flash.
Yeah, it's dirty cops.
I like
I
that.
really like that too. Like it takes something usually very fantastic and makes it kind of more heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, and I think considering Suicide Squad was in the same continuity,
Hmm.
at least it in
The
the
original
premise.
intent. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of more grounded view of things.
Yeah. It's I really like that a lot. Anyway, sorry, my brain is just kind of buzzing with how much that makes me happy to hear my brain. Iris West helps Barry expose the corrupt cops because her brother was also framed and died in prison, and she bonds with Barry over losing people to the corrupt system. She knows about Barry's powers from the start because he saved her life in Justice League, and she's the one who names him the Flash, which
Hmm.
in the current continuity is not the case because that Flash accidentally gets brought over into the CW show, and he's like, "Whoa, are you the Flash too?" He's like, "What do you the Flash?" And then he fades out, and that's why he calls himself the Flash, is because the Flash.
Yeah, because
Oh,
he travels across the Spider-Verse to meet
yeah,
other Flashes,
that was, I believe, the Crisis on Infinite Earths event.
which I did think that was really funny, seeing like movie showing up in the CW where
Yeah,
you're
that was
like,
kind of cool.
where you're like, that shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah,
Like Brandon Routh showing back up as Superman, like, okay, you had all the materials there. You just need someone to sign the thing. Getting Ezra Miller in the suit
yeah.
to show up again. So that was fun.
And also, it's worth pointing out that one of the reasons Warner Brothers pushed back on this is they wanted a multiverse picture from the get-go, because they wanted to undo Batman versus Superman and Man of Steel immediately, and that was largely spearheaded by Jeff Johns, who not only was public about wanting to undo those movies, but publicly stated that he used his position in Warner Brothers to try and get adaptations and characters of his comics in the movie so he could get paychecks from it. And he wasn't ashamed of it. He was like, "Ha ha, I'm gaming the system. I'm so smart." And now he's not working there at all, which is probably the first smart choice anyone at Warner Brothers has made in a while.
I mean, I don't like Jeff Johns. I don't think
No,
anyone really is a huge fan of him.
you'd be surprised.
However, like if I were a comic book writer and they're like, "Oh, we want you to make movies," and every time one of a comic, like if one of your comic books
Yeah.
gets adapted, you get a paycheck. Part of me would be like, "Well, can I put a reference in there?"
I think there's like obviously like okay, how can this be mutually beneficial? And then there's how can I put my financial gain ahead of the quality of the universe
Yeah,
that I'm trying to help shepherd?
well, yeah, and that's the detriment is when you're holding back current creativity
Yeah.
to like you're binding it to past creativity,
Yeah.
which is one of the issues people have with like long-standing continuity universes is just because you're like, oh, we want to do a version of, like Spider-Man or something where he's, gritty and alcoholic and or
Spider-Man
whatever.
Noir.
And people are like, Tom Holland wouldn't be like that. It's like, so yeah,
Yeah.
I get the
And all the sort of like racial injustice and corrupt cops, like the stuff you're picking up on, like
mhm.
real world things that people actually, don't like in real life for obvious reasons. Warner Brothers thought that would be too much of a hot button topic. And then Black Panther, briefly touched on some of that stuff and like it's come up somewhat in Marvel, but famously Rick, whose last name I still can't pronounce, posted all over Instagram and Twitter how like oh like all the articles like I'm so glad they commented on this in Black Panther. He's like oh so superhero movies can talk about that. Interesting. I wish someone could have beat them to the punch. Cough cough wink wink because he would have with his
Yeah.
movie. Um. Anyway,
Ooh.
Nico, our third co-host. So, moving forward, Cyborg helps Barry investigate the rogues and joins in the final battle to fight Golden Glider. Barry's father, Henry Allen, helps Barry expose the corrupt cops by having an informant who's locked up, by saving an informant who's locked up with him in Iron Heights after the cops attempt to have him killed. So, we're in a subplot about Henry Allen keeping an informant alive, which
Hmm.
is kind of cool.
So what point to Captain Cold and
But
sorry.
the supporting characters include Roman Burke, the leader of the corrupt cops, Alex Petrov, Barry's boss at the crime lab, who is working with Burke, Captain David Singh, and Detective Fred Shire, who knows, and Jared Murillo, and Paul Gambley, the Rogue's handler. Lex Luthor is revealed as the Rogue's employer in the end. I like that.
Huh.
That's kind of that makes sense actually that he would bankroll. He's like,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't
I mean
want this whole Justice
he
League.
knows about the Flash and wants to.
Yeah, because he had those files of like if Batman can't succeed in killing Superman, and I can't get this guy like this Doomsday thing to work. I go blackmail Barry Allen or Arthur, and I'll get someone to kill this Superman for me. Which is kind of cool that his plan to kill Superman ended up becoming a Justice League. I think that's nifty. Um, there are three major action scenes: the opening with Barry fighting crime across Central City and foiling the rogues before they get their weapons, and the second confrontation where the rogues nearly kill the Flash. In the final battle, Barry and Cyborg fight the rogues who use the electromagnetic weapons to cause several disasters across the city that Barry and Cyborg must deal with, while also having to protect Iris from the corrupt cops. Interesting. Golden Glider dies when her device malfunctions and disintegrates her. Captain Cold blames the Flash and ends up in jail, but Luthor breaks him out and recruits him for the Injustice Gang. Don't like that name.
Justice Gang.
It could just be a title that someone gave it as a placeholder instead of Injustice League or Legion of Doom or whatever. But it did seem like they were like, we want an Injustice League, which that's just the
Yeah, he
Legion of
said.
Doom. And then the comic Injustice, they put that name. See, people are like Injustice League from the comics, but neither of those titles are from the comics. It's like a dream of a dream or a copy of a copy. Burke is killed, and Petrov is arrested, having proved they fabricated evidence against Henry. Barry convinces the judge to grant Henry an appeal to overturn his sentence. Barry's time travel in Justice League is referenced, and he briefly reverses time again. He also learns how to phase through solid objects, become invisible, create vortexes, move so fast he is in two places at once, and bring others into his speed aura. That's kind of fun. And finally, Reverse Flash is only alluded to in a nightmare that Barry has about his mother's death and a brief moment when he steps into the Speed Force and senses someone else is there with him. That's spooky.
That is spooky.
I really dig that. I dig that a lot. So yeah, that's the basic premise of the unmade Flash movie that would have come out somewhere probably would have been 2018, 2019 if things had been
And the
on
thing
track.
is, that would be an amazing comic to read.
Yeah, super good. And what's funny is so I've been watching the 90s Flash show recently. And John Wesley Shipp crushes as Barry Allen. Like he's so good. Probably my new favorite version of the Flash across any medium. And I could totally see him doing this, and I could also see Ezra doing this. The only person I can't really see doing this is Grant Gustin, not because he's a bad actor, but because this is just like 3 degrees separated from him, and it's so similar that my brain just keeps reimagining the CW show, which is
Yeah, like where it's like goes back to see his mom get murdered. I just picture the crime scene from the CW.
yeah. But yeah,
So, what's the purpose of the time travel in this story?
I think it's just something bad happens, and he briefly, like in the good Justice League movie, where he sort of rewinds time by a couple seconds in order to fix something last second. So
Hmm.
he does that, and it could have even been, I mean, just from this, it could have been they're about to kill him, and he revert like uses the last of his power to like puts his hand up before like they freeze gun him or whatever, and it reverses time long enough for him to get out of the way, and then they're like, where did he go? It could have been any number of things.
Which I kind of would like the idea. Remember, it was a Wally West storyline, but it was also in like the Flash, where it's like he goes so fast that he starts getting enveloped into the Speed Force.
Yeah.
I would like to see that version happening, but as he realizes he's about to fall into the Speed Force, he intentionally runs into Captain Cold's gun because the reason,
It slows him down.
yeah, it reduces energy in a space, and so like it would be something he
It's
uses
like
intentionally.
Speed Force breaks.
Yeah, and so he would intentionally use it
Imagine
to
if he
slow him
had that
down.
just in like his belt of like I'm going too fast. It's like pulling the parachute
And then suddenly every leaves
dragster
a
car.
trail of ice behind him, the like
Yeah.
where it clearly slowed him down. That's actually like a dope idea.
We're doing a really good job of building out this character. Uh anyway,
What would you call that device that he would have?
I probably if it was the CW they just call it speed brakes. Probably I would have it labeled like emergency stop or something like that because I just think of dragster cars that have to stop after accelerating incredibly fast down a short strip.
Mm,
They hit the parachute and it pops out the back and it slows them down immediately.
mm.
So that's where my brain goes because automotive past. So that's just my touchstone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it's the freeze button.
that's stupid.
Yeah, but Barry's kind of a dork. Anyway, yeah, I thought this was really fascinating and an interesting way to look at what
The
survived
I
like 50 reboots of this
one
script.
critique of this,
Okay.
only one. Captain Cold having like an exosuit thing. That's
Well, I don't know if it may just be the type of thing where like it doesn't give him extra strength or speed. It just his gun is heavy and it helps him carry
well.
it.
My thing is that's kind of Mister Freeze's thing. Is that the moment
Mm.
other people are carrying around freeze guns, the thing he has is the fact that he has a giant suit that's like lugging things
Well, his
around.
isn't to help him carry heavy things. It's to keep him from melting like a popsicle or like a
Though,
British person
if
in
it
80 degrees.
granted, it would be kind of cool to see a version where instead of it's like an exosuit, it's more like the what's that? I think it's the gun from the Matrix or from Alien or something, where it's on like an arm pinch
Oh, you're
for
thinking of
aliens.
aliens. Yeah.
Yeah. Where
By
it's
the
like,
way, that female Marine is also the adoptive mother that gets taken over, replaced by the Liquid Terminator, the whole Wolfie scene. That's Vasquez in
wait,
Aliens, because the same
so
director.
Liquid Terminator who like kills her and
Yeah,
impersonates the mom.
yeah.
That's
That's
her.
the super jacked female Marine. She also wrote a novel set in that universe because her brother was a for real Marine. So she's like, yeah, I just talked to him about it. And yeah, she's like a legit cool person.
Whoa.
And that novel came out like within the last like
So I
3
remember
years.
thinking, I was like, man, she really stole the show in that movie.
Yeah,
Why isn't she in other things?
a great,
Apparently she was.
great secondary sort of background
Apparently she
character.
was in like two of the biggest movies from the 80s.
Yeah. Well, it was Jim Cameron was like, hey, you want to be in another big sci fi movie? She's like, yeah. I'm actually shocked she isn't. I mean, she might be an Avatar for all I know. She could be one of the blue background people.
And I'm certain Stranger Things would have tried to get her.
Yeah. So I think this is a cool Flash story, and I'm sort of on like a Flash train right now with the '90s show,
Part
which
of me
so
wants to
good.
start
The
like
'90s
taking
show.
no, well,
Oh,
potentially,
I think you
but
might like it.
I would like to take scenes from this that it describes and actually sketch them out to sort of create a visual aid of like this might be what the movie looked like. Because from what we see from the Flash movie we got,
Mm-hmm.
we do see like young Barry in his house, so we do have a rough idea of like what the set design would have looked like.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I kind of would have liked to. Part of me wants to work on that a bit.
It would definitely be cool. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what
There's also a distinct lack of a Supergirl in that,
or 13 Bat people.
or another Barry.
Yeah, and something interesting about all this though is like I like the idea that he has like how Bruce Wayne had nightmares caused by Barry. Barry's having nightmares caused by Reverse Flash. I don't like the idea. I like the idea that the cops were corrupt and it wasn't Reverse Flash that killed that
Yeah.
framed anyone. Or maybe he pushed the cops to do it, I would
Yeah,
allow.
it's kind of like how in one continuity for the Spider-Man animated thing, they made it where Cletus Cassidy is the one that murdered Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, oh, this guy is going to die. This guy's a murderer in the universe. Let's connect the two.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really smart idea of fixing, and that was in like the PlayStation, like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game for like handheld PlayStations
Yeah.
that came out, and that was like that premise in itself. You're like, that's genius.
Yeah, and there, if people are watching this on YouTube, I'll have some images up of the concept art that was what this costume was going to look like, and it was pretty swanky, if I'm being frank about
And
it.
it looked like, I feel like the current Flash suit design, which I don't want to be too mean to this, but
From certain angles, I don't hate it.
it lacks a lot of the detail, and it feels like someone was listening to the whole competitive ice skating joke from the movie, and then they were like using that as the basis, where it's like spandex. See, like the plate armor, I like. It's the smoothness of like that, where it's all rubbery, and I I don't like it looking rubbery.
Well, I mean, who's to say what it would have ended up looking fabricated? Because if you look at the concept art for the existing Flash movie that's just come out and what his suit actually looks like, there's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I think that what was I think it was Arkham Knight finally did it, where like
Yeah,
Batman's
this was closer to what I think the current Flash movie was trying to do, and then
yeah, it just
overcomplicated.
a red Tron Legacy looking
And
thing.
I like Tron Legacy.
But like Arkham Knight had a thing where like Batman's cape had like this glistening texture, where you're like, you look at it and you're like, I know exactly what that would look like in
You
real
you
life.
know what it would feel like.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something you kind of need to do when making a movie. Like Black Panther suit, I have no idea what that would feel like to touch, because it's like this weird
Well, the
material.
Civil War one, it would feel like Kevlar. You know, the Civil War one, I feel like I know what that would feel like, but I know what you're talking about because the all CGI one from
Yeah,
the
or like
solo movie.
Iron Man's bleeding edge suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, which apparently the term bleeding edge comes from business cards. Whenever they make business cards, they have an
right.
edge that has a bleed on it, and they cut the bleeding edge off.
Yeah, I know because like in poster print, any type of print or published design, you're supposed to leave margins for, if it's a print ad, it might get caught in the fold, or people like the printer doesn't always work well at the at
Yeah,
limits of paper. I never put that together.
yeah. It was a weird thing that I was like, what?
People also confuse Extremis and Bleeding Edge from the comics, which are two different things, but they get used interchangeably because those changes to his
Well-
powers happened pretty much back to back.
And also, they're both the idea of like, what if Iron Man's suit was inside his body? Like to an extent of like,
To an extent, you're not wrong. To an extent. I guess I'll just show you the 90s Flash costume, which I think is still the reigning champion of
Didn't you
live
say
action
it looks like a
Flash.
Batman cowl on it? Looks like it's made of felt.
Yeah, it has a very felty design. And when the CW brought him back for the Crisis event, they gave it the same texture, which I thought was a nice touch.
Uh,
Yeah, good old John Wesley Shipp. Here's him with Mark Hamill.
right, Mark Hamill.
He was the trickster.
Wow, that outfit.
Yeah, that
There,
was, yeah. There's a lot of squiggly lines.
dear listener, there is no words that could possibly describe what that looks like.
Oh, I got it. If Zoe Deschanel had a laser tag team, she would dress the way that Mark Hamill is dressed in that photo.
Yeah, but like Mark Hamill, it like looks like Luke Skywalker, but not.
Yeah, it's that era where he still is, but also
And
isn't.
also, he's just wielding a like a 6-shooter revolver, like just a normal gun.
I mean, the first episode, they straight up machine gun cops to death right in front of the poor kids trying to watch. So people complain about like Wonder Woman blowing up a suicidal terrorist to save a bunch of children, which is weird because literally everyone gets what they wanted out of that situation. They would not have survived the 90s Flash TV show. If like, oh, like the Flash is straight up like, if you try this again, I'll like punch you at supersonic speed and kill you because no one cared about the comics back then, and I gotta be honest, the overall quality was better because of it. Like here he is walking in front of a poster for Batman '89, which I don't understand how that's feasible. It always brings me back to that thing of like who's selling superhero merch in these movies and what is the backstory in universe. Like, Batman, secretly a vampire from
Well,
Transylvania.
well, that's the thing. Like in a world with like in like their universe, Batman's a public figure, like George Washington or Sam Adams.
Not always, because not everyone believes he's real. He's like the
Well,
Mothman.
yeah, like the Mothman, but in that way, he's public domain, meaning anyone could make Batman merch,
Hmm.
and no one would stop them. There'd definitely be some different interpretations, but like, there's nothing stopping you from having like a show where like, oh, it's Frankenstein, it's the Mothman, it's Batman.
My assumption was that it was Booster Gold who traveled back in time and trademarked all of it ahead of time, because even in Man of Steel, his comic book shop where it's just his version of the stories that he's heard, it's one of the buildings in Metropolis during the fight. It's
That's
literally blink and you'll miss it. So, what do you think of the Unmade Flash?
I mean, I would have watched it. I think the fact that me saying like, oh, if it was a comic book series, I would be reading that. Granted,
I just want to see him fight the Rogues because we have one scene he shares with Captain Boomerang. It's not enough for me.
honestly, I would just say bring back Captain Boomerang.
Yeah, we've already talked about how just bring him back, either say Harley's an unreliable narrator and the second movie was just her idea, the Flash went back in time and changed things, or just never explain why he comes back because Boomerang's always come back.
Yeah, and yeah, there's been like 3 different Captain Boomerangs. Granted, well, I know the second Captain Boomerang is his son,
Mhm.
who just takes on the moniker, and I think he's supposed to be a hero.
Weird.
Yeah, it's real stupid.
Anyway, yeah. Flash. Flash fact. This would have been a cool movie.
Yeah. Oh, also, just on top of Captain Boomerang to finish us off, my pitch for Captain Boomerang was that his boomerangs were made out of a weird metal that whenever the Flash started running, his lightning would arc to them and cause them to sort of rubber band around him in an orbit.
And make it like dangerous.
Yeah, it's kind of like Justice League Doom, where he can't stop, and he has to keep running as like the boomerangs are falling around him. So Captain Boomerang is like really good Flash villain because he planned it out and now has a system that
Well, in the Suicide Squad comics, they show that he's actually, while he's not great at defeating the Flash, who is basically a demigod of speed,
Yeah,
and can outrun the physical manifestation of death and restart universes. That means he actually is like a complete badass against every normal person. So he can just throw a beer bottle through your head.
huh.
He's like Gambit, but without the weird accent.
I didn't
And a
think-
different weird
I
accent.
didn't think about that, but like Flash does have reality warping powers, and this guy with no powers goes toe to toe with him on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And has zero scars.
Like I'll probably put the comic panels up, but like he beats up an entire special forces team while drunk, throwing beer mugs and like pool balls, and killing them while drunk and bragging that he got out of Task Force X, which means he broke the rules of Task Force X, so he gets brought back onto the Suicide Squad. Just when you think you're out, they pull you
What's
back.
Task Force X?
That's the Suicide Squad. That's the official term for the squad.
Oh.
And then they call it the Suicide Squad because
I kind of
you're
like.
sent on suicide
I
missions.
like the idea that the people on the actual squad have a different name for it.
I mean, that's why. What are we? Some type of Suicide Squad? In universe, that's the first time someone's called it that. Everyone else calls it Task Force X, and then I guess it just sticks. Like that Floyd guy was really onto something.
Well, even if you kill off most of them, and it's like, oh, we're gonna throw in new people to this roster, and there's like only 3 people from the last one, and they're like, oh yeah, this is the Suicide Squad, you're gonna die.
Also, people have a misconception, like, oh, Suicide Squad, so you expect to kill all of them. The people who say that have never read a Suicide Squad comic. The main roster doesn't change that often because they're name brand characters and villains. They're like the Expendables. We're on Expendables 4, and so far one person has died, and that person was introduced in the movie so that he could die and you would want revenge with the rest of the team. Out of 4
They're more like Ocean's 13.
the whole point is that you are expendable, but they're also so good, they're the only guys who keep coming back from those missions. So the Suicide Squad are sent on suicide missions, but all of the missions that take place in between the movies or the comic book issues are where all of the D-listers you've never heard of die because they can't cut it in a world where only the supervillains survive these missions.
Huh.
And even they don't always make it.
Huh.
So yeah. I would have watched this movie. I give it hypothetical 9 out of 10 stars just because I want to give it 10 out of 10, but who knows?
Yeah, 9 out of 10 cosmic dust that has the potential to form into a star.
Anyway, yeah. Keep your ear to the ground. Thanks for listening. And if you want to hear about D&D tabletop stuff, Daniel has a podcast called D and Dummies.
Yeah.
Where he's the D and I'm the dummy. Anyway, thanks for listening.